Acting District Attorney Shawn Smith held a press conference Tuesday, August 15th, announcing the indictment of an undocumented immigrant where elected officials decried bail reform and Democratic leadership in Albany.
All right, thank you everybody for coming. I want to announce an indictment that we had last week on Thursday. It's against the defendant's name is Cruz Garcia. He's 43 years old. And the reason why I called everybody here today is not only is it a serious case, there's 3 charges that he was indicted for. The first one is strangulation in the first degree. The second charge is unlawful imprisonment under conditions which expose the victim to the risk of serious physical injury. And the third and most serious count of the indictment is rape in the first degree, forcible compulsion. So this defendant is alleged to have forcibly raped an ex-girlfriend of his from about a year prior to that. But why I didn't just do a press release and I asked everybody here to join me is because I think that this case was made possible by some of the policies that are in place right now in New York State. The defendant lacks any legal status here in the United States. For one, right now he's in ICE custody. I've been coordinating with ICE and they indicated that they've been looking for him for at least a couple of years. And the worst part about it is we all knew where he was. We knew where he was because he was indicted in Orange County on June 12th, 2023 for several felonies. But because of New York State's bail reform laws, although he was on the run from ICE, he had to be mandatorily released on those charges. So he was released back into the community, and then on July 25th, 2023, about 5.5 weeks later, is when he's alleged to have committed these 3 violent felonies in our county. So that you have the two problems there. One is bail reform allowed him to be out and to be able to commit these crimes, these alleged crimes in our county. And second, if our law enforcement officers, whether it's the Sheriff's Department or the state police or the local law enforcement, if they had have been allowed to coordinate with ICE, this never would have happened because his information would have been provided to ICE and they would have came and taken him into custody. So that's the charges that we have, that's the indictment. And I want to turn it over to a second to our Delaware County Sheriff, Craig DeMunn, because he is, I work on a lot of cases with him and he's very passionate about these issues that I'm talking about. So, Sheriff.
Thank you, DA Smith. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm going to be very brief, but hopefully, I can sum this up the best way without becoming too emotional about it, because it's an emotional issue for me. Who thinks it's a good idea? Who would anyone with basic common sense thinks it's a good idea to release people that commit these types of offenses out on bail reform? I would just like to ask, take politics out of this. It's a nonpartisan issue, really. Everywhere I go, the people that I talk to, Republicans, Democrats, independents alike, everybody is saying that they are tired of these failed policies called bail reform. I think we're seeing an actual, somewhat of a movement in our state even, when we had tweaks to the bail reform just this last legislative season. And the contacts that I have in Albany telling me that's particularly what held up the state of budget. So obviously there are some people in Albany that are starting to pay attention to bail reform and making tweaks, or they refer to it often as reforming the reform. But a lot more needs to be done, because this is just one case out of thousands that happen across the state where victims are being ignored because of our state legislature's infatuation with criminal rights. Again, I ask, who with any basic common sense think this is a good idea? It's not a good idea. It's not making our communities safer. It's obvious. The Division of Criminal Justice Services' own numbers show that it's not making our communities any safer. It's making our communities more dangerous every day. Our urban communities are beginning to teeter and tip over as I speak. So, I get it. The only thing that ever stays the same in this country is everything changes, so I get it. There's always change and improvements that can be made to things. But when things are an obvious complete and utter disaster, it's time to really take some proactive measures and to do something different. One of the things that they say, the reason for bail reform was because it's unfair. People that may not be able to afford bail. Well, as first vice president of the New York State Sheriff's Association, I can speak on behalf of New York State sheriffs that were never invited to the table when it comes to this topic, or the District Attorneys Association was never invited to the table when we discuss this topic. We come up with a very simple, common sense measure. Take bail out of it altogether. If we're worried about that it's unfair for poor people that can't afford bail and rich people can, then let's just take the monetary means of bail completely out of it. Let's sit around a table and let's determine a list of charges that are dangerous offenses that create victims and say, there's no bail for any of these charges, no matter how much money you have, whether you have $1 in your pocket or 10 grand in your pocket. If you commit this offense, you're held until your trial. Well, that's too simplistic. Basic common sense to me. So I'll close with saying this. The second reason for bail reform is because it's unfair. Okay? It's unfair because it unduly locks up people for no reason at all. We have situations now that are happening across the state where people are committing heinous offenses and are being released on bail. People that are, as I spoke about earlier, that are creating victims that have been forgotten about in this state, that are being released on bail. These individuals go on to commit greater and greater offenses, where eventually, by the time the system catches up to them, it's too late. They've killed somebody. They've committed a capital offense. So where is the nipping it in the bud in the beginning and changing people and fixing people and helping people before they commit those offenses? This system that they say was designed to help people is actually setting them up for failure. The same people they said that they were trying to help is setting them up for failure. In my estimation, I've only got 35 years in this, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our congressman, and I really appreciate you taking up this issue, Congressman Mark Molinaro.
Sure. I appreciate it. Thank you. First, let's offer. We care deeply about the safety, the welfare, and the well-being of the victim, not only of this crime, but the victims that could have been because of the previous crime. The failure of New York's laws to allow for arrest and arraignment has, without question, in this case, led to a horrific crime and another victim. I want to acknowledge the work of the district attorney. We only a few months ago, before becoming a member of Congress, I was at a crime scene in the Hudson Valley, where the district attorney, because of New York's bail reform laws, struggled to navigate the complexities of the failure of state law in order to find some federal charge that could be pressed against an individual who shot and killed an innocent victim. The fact that they have to navigate through this maze of inefficient and insufficient state laws is a crime in and of itself. And so the work that district's attorney are doing all across the state, and your district attorney has accomplished this every day with staff is a monumental task. And to those in law enforcement who continue to go out day in and day out trying to keep our community safe and doing it well, we thank them as well. I served the last 12 years as a county executive. I saw as the state legislature took on what they refer to as bail reform. It is not reform. What New York State did was abandon bail as a tool not only to help keep people off the street and preserve safety and security in our communities, but they also abandoned it as a tool to intervene so that we can assist people dealing with mental health and substance use disorder. Bail was used as an effective tool to help divert from the criminal justice system, and the state legislature abandoned it because they applied a downstate problem, failure of the city of New York to protect the constitutional rights of people. They applied it statewide. And because of that, what they did was undo years and years of public safety. They undermined law enforcement, threatened the safety of individuals, create and recreate victims, and ultimately make our communities less safe. And nothing could be more clear than this case. An individual that should have been arrested and indicted and held and then communicated with federal law enforcement, none of that could happen. So this is a failure of the state of New York, but also, I will admit, a failure of the federal government to enforce the laws at our borders. We have a scenario where the state of New York set a fire, and they are unwilling to put it out. And I take only one issue with the sheriff. They're done tinkering with bail reform. They said this year, as Chris knows, they said this year that was it. If we continue down this path, we are going to continue to see victim after victim after victim, and we know it. We did a study that proved about the same number of individuals end up reoffending without bail that did when there was bail. No change in the data, but escalation in crime, because we're unable to intervene in low-level offenses when we should be able to protect the public and provide for public safety. It's why we have been calling for bipartisan action to secure our borders and enforce federal law, coordinate federal law enforcement with local law enforcement, and call on the state legislature to rescind and replace cashless bail in the state of New York and give us the system that would provide for constitutional protection but allow law enforcement to do its job and prosecutors to work to protect our communities. This is, without question, common sense. And we're not sure how many more victims must be made before the state of New York takes action. It demands executive leadership from Washington, and it requires executive leadership in Albany to bring the parties together, Republicans and Democrats, law enforcement, community advocates, everyone that needs to be at the table to find the right mix so that we can take the handcuffs off law enforcement and start working again to provide for public safety. It's why, as a member of Congress, I will continue to work hard for a compassionate approach to the humanitarian crisis at our border. There is a way for us to provide for public safety and border security while at the same time streamlining the asylum process and making it easier for employers to find their way to employees. But this is a tale that today, this is a tale of a failure of state and federal government to provide for public safety and protect victims. And that can't continue. And it's why we're going to continue to advocate for the change that's necessary. And so with that, let me introduce my good friend and somebody who understands this from the state legislature's perspective all too well, Assemblyman Chris Tague.
I don't know if you were clapping for him or clapping for me coming to the mic. Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. I just want to hit on one thing that both the sheriff and Mark and Shawn brought up. When people say the state legislature failed on bail reform, I'm part of the state legislature, and I didn't fail on bail reform. I voted against those measures because they were ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. As Mark said, trying to compound a problem in New York City with what's going on in rural upstate New York, and this is the type of legislation that we see all the time. But anyways, Cruz Garcia was an illegal immigrant. And let me say that again, illegal immigrant from Venezuela. He was immediately released from custody after being presented with 2 felony charges on June 12th. And then, only 6 weeks later, let me say that again, 6 weeks later, he brutally attacked and raped an innocent woman. An illegal felon was able to walk free because of the policy that was passed by New York State Democrats in Albany. Right now we are experiencing an immigration and security crisis like never before, which has single-handedly been manufactured by Democrats both in Albany and Washington, D.C. They and former Governor Cuomo, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and our governor, Kathy Hochul, have put policies in place that prevent law enforcement from even communicating or working with ICE agents. And by working with other law enforcement officials in regards to criminal activity or immigration status. If this and similar policies had not been in place, Cruz and many other criminals would have been deported a long time ago. Yet, they continue to ignore the implications of their radically liberal immigration and crime policies, while simultaneously putting everyone's safety and security at risk. And I want to repeat that, by putting everyone's safety and security at risk. My friends, these politicians are ignoring the needs of New Yorkers so they can fulfill their own backwards agendas. To my fellow lawmakers in Albany and those that supported these laws, you should be ashamed of yourselves. In your America, illegal criminals roam free and traumatize law-abiding American citizens. My message to you is this: the safety and security of our communities in America are priority number one. Stop the politics and do what is right to protect the people you represent and honor the oath that you took to God, country, and state. And to the victims of this heinous crime, I offer my sincerest apologies for New York and our federal government's failure to keep you safe. I will keep you in my prayers. We need to do better, and we will do better. Thank you. It's now my honor to introduce to you the chairman of the Delaware County Board of Supervisors, Ms. Tina Millay.
Good afternoon. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge the great job being done by Sheriff DeMond and Acting District Attorney Smith. Their leadership and professionalism have created a legal system here in Delaware County that is not only fair, but is guided with compassion and care, not only for the 47,000 residents of Delaware County, but also for those that end up in the judicial system from everywhere. They have proven that compassion and caring about the rehabilitation of individuals is not only the best form of law enforcement, but is also the most effective way in keeping all of us safe. Many individuals in Delaware County that are arrested and indicted don't just go to jail and that's it. The programs run out of the courthouse and the jail are built around rehabilitation, giving the help to individuals that they need, whether it is addiction counseling, mental health screening, or even medical care and career guidance. This is the side of law enforcement our leaders in Albany have failed to acknowledge exists, painting a picture of law enforcement as archaic and brutal. The politically driven decisions of state leadership that not only imposed bail reform, has also refused to change it, when local law enforcement agencies has proven its failures. That same leadership has now opened our doors to illegal immigrants that are not properly vetted for citizenship prior to being placed in remote areas like Delaware County. Delaware County is the 5th largest county in New York State with an area just shy of 1,500 square miles. Our vast open space and sparse population makes it difficult for Delaware County to provide much needed housing, medical care, public transportation, jobs, and so much more to our local taxpayers. Now we are being told we must use those limited resources to help the immigrants migrating to New York State, exasperating an already difficult situation. Please do not misunderstand. Delaware County does not oppose helping immigrants, and in fact, we have embraced those that have come here and want to make our beautiful area their home. However, as our state of emergency stipulates, we do not have the resources available to help our current population. Therefore, placing the immigrants in our area will further hinder their ability to find the path to citizenship. We do not have the resources to house them, educate their youth, provide jobs for them, or even help them with transportation and medical care as needed. Bail reform and the immigration policies of New York State were not well thought out before being imposed, and the administration has proven that they are more interested in making political statements than they are in solving problems caused by these mandates. Bail reform has tied the hands of our local law enforcement, taking away powerful tools to incarcerate individuals that could benefit from the many programs offered through the system to help change their lives for the better. It has also kept them from protecting witnesses that are essential, especially in rural areas, to help keep drug dealers off our streets and away from our children, or remove repeat sex offenders, such as the one in this recent case from our community. Immigration policies have done more harm than good, moving immigrants away from urban areas that are better equipped to provide resources, care, and assistance where there are language barriers to education and job placement. This is not the fault of the immigrants that are only seeking a better life for themselves and their families, not unlike our ancestors. The fault lies with our federal and state leadership that has created the current political policies that have hindered the ability of individuals to come here legally. The system is broken, and there is little to no effort being made to fix it. Instead, our leaders are putting communities like ours in jeopardy and further dividing our communities and our nation on an issue that should be uniting us instead. Thank you for everyone who's come out here today to learn about these important issues that we continue to face. Thank you.
To subscribe or advertise, call 607-464-4009.